Good afternoon and welcome everyone to this afternoon's ACARE at ANU student presentation session. I'd like to start by acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet and pay our respect to the elders past and present. My name is Lucas and I'll be chairing today's session. Our first presenter for today is Alexander. Alex, please start when you're ready.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexander Hendry. Now, the leopard cat, the marble cat, and the bay cat are three sympatric species of feline that live in Southeast Asia. They occur in similar habitats and occupy similar ecological niches, yet they each have different conservation statuses. This raises the question, why are some species endangered, whereas closely related species may not be? To provide some small insight into this important question of conservation biology, I conducted research on the habitat associations of the marble cat in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is the most felid-rich region in the world, which means it has the largest number of wildcat species. However, Southeast Asia is a region that has undergone profound environmental change in recent decades. For example, the majority of Southeast Asia's forests are now fragmented, and many neighbor oil palm plantations. This habitat destruction is expected to threaten the region's felid diversity. However, one Southeast Asian species, the leopard cat, has been found to thrive in oil palm plantations, where it hunts rodents at night. Clearly, more research on the habitat associations of Southeast Asia's felids is needed. This leads on to the focal species of my research, the marble cat. The marble cat is a rare semi-arboreal felid that can be found in a diverse range of forests in Southeast Asia. It is currently listed as near threatened on the IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, Red List of Threatened Species, and this is because its population is thought to be declining. However, population data for this species is lacking, and the exact extent of this population decline is not known. If we were to determine the habitat associations of the marble cat, conservation managers could make informed inferences to the species' occupancy and abundance within the remaining forests of Southeast Asia. This leads on to my research question. What are the habitat associations of the marble cat in Southeast Asia, particularly in relation to disturbed landscapes? I hypothesized that detections of the marble cat would decline as both forest size and forest quality decreases, as the marble cat is generally considered to be a forest-dependent species. I also hypothesized that unlike the leopard cat, detections of the marble cat would decline near oil palm plantations, as the marble cat has never been recorded within an oil palm plantation. To test these hypotheses, we collated georeferenced marble cat occurrence records from a literature review of previously published camera trapping studies within the marble cat's range. Additionally, my supervisor, Dr. Matthew Luskin, and his colleagues conducted 17 new camera trapping surveys in 3 countries of the marble cat's range from 2013 to 2019. Now, camera trapping involves the installation of a small motion-sensitive camera in a landscape, usually alongside a hiking or wildlife trail. When an animal walks past the camera trap, the motion sensor is triggered and a photograph is taken for later analysis. This photograph below shows a marble cat that one of Dr. Luskin's camera traps photographed in Sumatra in 2014. Using this literature review as well as the new camera trapping surveys, we were able to create a detection history matrix for the marble cat, as well as other species of wildlife in Southeast Asia. These marble cat detections were then analyzed alongside forest and oil palm covariate data using generalized linear mixed modeling. The forest and oil palm covariate data was sourced from GIS layers. These GIS layers allowed us to quantify the environment in a 20-kilometer radius around the centroid of a landscape in which a camera trapping survey occurred. And now this schematic diagram shows an example of this, where the red dots represent the location of a camera trapping survey, and the black circle represents the 20-kilometer radius. The GIS layers would then allow us to determine the percent of that area that is covered in oil palm plantations. We also use the GIS layers to determine the percent area of the marbled cat's range that is forested and the percent area of its range that is under some form of formula protection. In total, we collated 85 camera trapping surveys in the marbled cat's range, 49 of which detected species. We sourced data from 5 countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, therefore constituting the largest and geographically broadest camera trapping dataset ever assessed for the marbled cat. Now let's have a look at the results. On this graph, the y-axis shows the number of marbled cat detections, whereas the x-axis shows the percent forest cover within a 20 kilometer radius. And on this graph, we can see the forest size in square kilometers. As you can see, marbled cat detections were significantly positively associated with both forest cover and forest size. Conversely, there was a significant negative association between marbled cat detections and oil palm plantations. This contrasts with the leopard cat, which we found to be significantly positively associated with oil palm plantations. Additionally, we found that 64.9% of the marbled cat's range in Southeast Asia is forested, and 18.5% of this range is protected. So now, what do these results mean? Well, firstly, my first hypothesis was supported by the data. The marbled cat appears to be a forest-dependent species and is likely to be most abundant in large, intact forests. My second hypothesis was also supported by the data. It appears that the marbled cat, unlike the leopard cat, is unable to adjust to oil palm plantations. Additionally, as we found that the marbled cat is a forest-dependent species, but only 65% of its currently recognized range is forested, it is likely that the actual extent of occurrence of the marbled cat may be 35% smaller than what the IUCN estimates it to be. So why is the marbled cat unable to adjust to oil palm plantations when other tropical felids, such as the leopard cat in Southeast Asia and the jaguarundi in the neotropics, are regularly recorded within oil palm plantations? Well, these adaptable felids are largely terrestrial hunters, whereas the marbled cat is an arboreal hunter. Oil palm plantations lack the tree connectivity of intact forests, therefore making it difficult or even impossible for the marbled cat to effectively hunt within an oil palm plantation. The arboreal nature of the marbled cat likely prevents it from adjusting to oil palm plantations and other degraded landscapes. So what are the conservation implications of these findings? Well, firstly, it is apparent that habitat destruction is the largest conservation threat to the marbled cat. As it is a forest-dependent species, the loss of habitat can reasonably be assumed to correlate to a parallel decline in population. When the marbled cat's forest dependence is viewed in conjunction with the species' inability to adjust to oil palm plantations, and our finding that the marbled cat's range may be up to 35% smaller than previously estimated, and the ongoing habitat destruction that is still occurring in Southeast Asia, it is reasonable to suspect that the population decline experienced by the marbled cat is more severe than what the IUCN estimates to be. Therefore, the marbled cat's conservation status should be upgraded to vulnerable. It appears that arborality makes small fields more vulnerable to deforestation and other forms of habitat destruction than their terrestrial relatives. Therefore, the conservation status of other semi-arboreal fields, such as the margay in South America, should urgently be reassessed. There is still much that is not known about the marbled cat. However, the unique spot patterns of the marbled cat's coat mean that individuals can be readily identified. This is a common strategy used in the study of wild cats. To do this, camera traps need to be installed on opposite sides of a trail. Therefore, when a cat walks past it, both sides of its bodies are photographed and it could be identified as an individual. If a marbled cat was photographed, if an individual marbled cat was photographed at multiple camera trap stations, we could begin to estimate its movements and home range size. These data would inform conservation area planning efforts for the marbled cat and provide much needed insight into what the ideal size of such a conservation area should be. This concludes my presentation, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my supervisor, Dr. Matthew Luskin, for allowing me to be part of this project and teaching me a lot of new things. I would also like to thank Zach Amir and Henry Decour for their assistance with the data analysis. and the other members of the Ecological Cascade Labs for their feedback and encouragement. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thanks a lot, Alex. So now we have our Q&A for Alex's presentation. We'll start with judges. Are there any questions that you have to raise?
I do have a question that I wanted to ask. I had two, but then you already answered one of them in the presentation, so I crossed that one out quickly.
Great.
I was just wondering, in regards to, you were talking about the landscape of oil plantations and the no, I'm not going to say the word correctly, so apologies. But the nature of the marble cats, where they can't adapt to that type of landscape. Is there any consideration to test like similar landscapes to see if that is the adaptation problem, to see if there can be, a solution, both a solution to help them better adapt to those type of areas, or a better understanding about all of the industrial and building impact that it has on their natural habitats and how they are able to move about and adapt.
Well, I don't think it's really as possible for the oil palm plantation. Where's the picture of it down here? I just like the nature of the tree, it's just not really a sort of tree that an arboreal species can adapt to. Yeah, I don't think it's not really possible to make these degraded landscapes suitable for the marble cat. It's clearly is a forest dependent species, and therefore if we want to conserve it in other species, we have to make sure that we are protecting what forests we do have left, and connecting the forest fragments that we do have left. But yeah, the marble cat just shows that some species, they just need that intact forest. They can't rely on the secondary forest. They can't rely on the oil palm plantations. And I think the marble cat is a good example of one of those species.
Yeah, okay.
I actually had exactly the same question, so thank you for asking that one, Sarah. But I also had another, which was, are there any other practical implications for society flowing from this, whether local communities or all the way up to international? I mean, I'm thinking in terms of what does this research mean in terms of things like the situation of the marbled cat in its ecosystem, in terms of its impact on its prey, for instance?
Mm-hmm.
Have you had an opportunity to look at any of those kinds of sort of flow-on implications from the research?
At this stage, no. We're just really looking at the habitat associations of the marbled cat. But the local to global scale, I think it's what's apparent from this research is that this destruction of the habitat and the planting of the oil palm plantations that's pretty bad for a lot of species, and there are just some species that are not going to adapt to it, and that we therefore need to make sure that we're being sustainable with our oil palm production. But I'm actually glad you raised its prey, the topic of its prey, because the marble cat, we actually don't know what it eats. Like, I suspect that it goes for birds and monkeys because it's an arboreal predator, but there's just very little data on its prey. But yes, that is another thing I am looking into, but in this presentation, I only had 10 minutes, so I just had to focus on the key points.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's no more questions from the judges, I can't see any raised from the audience in the Q&A box. And so with that, we can go on to our next presenter.
So, good afternoon, the honorable ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nur Hanifa, and I'm undergraduate student in IPB University in Department of Forest Conservation, Resources, and Ecotourism. In this very good occasion, I would like to present my research entitled Community Perception and Environmental Impact in Tourism Development in Kelapa II Island, Seribu Island, Indonesia. Here is my outline of this presentation. First is introduction. Kelapa Dua Island, which is the smallest residential in the Seribu Island region. The area of this island is only 1.9 hectares with a population of 463 people. Apart from being a settlement, this island is also a tourist destination for domestic and foreign tourists. There are some tourist destinations such as mangrove trekking, mangrove planting, kayaking, turtle conservation, and many more. As a tourist area, as well as a conservation area, the environmental impact is one of the important things that must be considered. Therefore, the Seribu Islands government has determined environmental conservation as one of the priorities for development of the Seribu Islands, so that environmental impacts are also consideration for local governments in making policies, including on Kelapa Dua Island. But so far, research on environmental impacts on Kelapa Dua Island has only been limited to the condition of coral reefs. There has been no research on the condition of the area on the island. The environmental impact in this study is in the form of biophysical impacts, including impacts on terrestrial vegetation, ecosystem animals, and living ecosystem. This research also taken based on the community's perspective. Community's perspective is important to community involvement in consider in the development and sustainability of tourism places, and also for public perception can influence community support for tourism development. So the objective of my research is this study aims to identify community perception and environmental impacts in Kelapa Dua Island, identify the actual environmental impacts in Kelapa Dua Island, and also analyze the relationship between public perception and environmental impacts in the development of tourism that occurs in Kelapa Dua Island, Seribu Island. Second is the method, research method. The research design that I use is a mixed method, quantitative and qualitative method, and the data collection was carried out in June 2021 in Kelapa Dua Island, Seribu Island, Indonesia, and among of the subject are 90 people in Kelapa Dua Island that have criteria minimum age 20 years old, resident of Kelapa Dua Island, willing to be research respondent. For the selection of respondent is carried out by convenience sampling. Tools for data processing is use SPSS. So here's the data that I collect with the detail of research method. For the field observation were carried out in the form of exploration by visiting and also circling the island to obtain the data on environmental impacts. And for literature study were carried out to obtain facts on the condition of Kelapa Dua Island based on the relevant past study. We go to the next slide is result and discussion. For the first result is the questionnaire result that I separated to the respondent. From the table, we know that as many as 77.5% of respondents agree that tourism has a positive impact on plant sustainability. 71.9% of respondents agree that tourism has a positive impact on ecosystem animals, and 5.3% of respondents agree that tourism has a positive impact on ecosystem. For the next result is from literature studies and field observation. From literature studies from Setiawan et al. 2011, we know that in Kelapa Dua Islands shows decrease in fish catches, in decrease in water quality, low index of marine and biodiversity, and decline in abundance of reef fish. And for the field observation that I did, show that so many people get difficult for people to find fish, so they have to go far from the previous. and there is presence of chunks of coral in every resident house and pills garbage around the house, and also list the number of residents who have washing toilets and model of houses on stilts which doesn't have a shower. Next, for the discussion, from the questionnaire result, we know that local communities still gave a positive response of the environmental impacts in their area. Meanwhile, data from DKI Jakarta Department of Housing and Regional Government Building show that Kelapa II Island is categorized as a slums area. Other than that, in the tourism activities in Kelapa II also causes a lot of waste and not being managed properly. For the fishing area, the fishermen should go farther away from the Kelapa II Island because the fish is not available anymore in that area. This research provides information to the local government that community have no high consideration about environmental changes that occur because the level of public education tends to be low and the community is used to such condition. Next is the conclusion and recommendation. This conclusion, for the first conclusion, is local community in Kelapa II Island still gave a positive response to environmental impacts in their area. And second, based on the literature studies and also observation field that show in Kelapa II Island happen a decrease in fish catches, a low index of marine biodiversity, decline in the abundance of reef fish, and many more. And for the third is public perception regarding environmental impacts and the environmental actual condition is different in the Kelapa II Island because maybe the community is used to such conditions. My recommendation of this research is local government should be necessary to carry out more intensive environmental awareness to the community so that community is able to cooperate in protecting the environment and so that environmental impacts do not get worse. Last but not least, in this valuable chance, I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation for people who have provided motivation, advice, and also support for me. First is for my parents, my mother and my father, Susana and Torikin, and second is my supervisor, Miss Eva Rahmawati, PhD. Yeah, thank you. That's my presentation. Thank you for your attention. If there are any question, don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you, Noor. So now we'll move to the Q&A session. Alex, was that a raised hand I saw just before?
Yes, it was. Thanks for the presentation, Noor. I would just like to know is how do people mainly travel to the island? By boat or by airplane?
Yeah, people travel to the island by boat, by ship. Yeah, boat. Yeah, there is a transportation that a special transportation that bring people to island. Yeah, to go to island to another island. Sorry.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from the judges today? Sarah?
Yeah, I do have a question. I was just wondering, you referenced both a literature study that was talking about the decreased amount of fish, and then also like the monthly reports that referred to the plumbing in homes, in local homes. And I was just wondering if either the literature study about the decreased fish or the monthly reports actually talked about the connection between those occurrences and tourism. So like if they actually talked about tourism impacting on the local fish population, or any kind of connection between tourism and the lack of plumbing in the homes.
Sorry, Miss, can you, would you mind to repeat your question anymore?
Yeah, sure. Look, yeah, no, that's fine. Look, I'll go with the first bit. So in the literature study about the decrease in fish and the fishermen having to go further out, did that research actually talk about, did it actually show that tourism was the reason that the fish weren't nearby, and actually say that it was because of tourism that the fishermen had to go out further to catch fish?
Yeah, there is research about that that show fishermen have to go far from usual, and I got the information from the annual report of the Kelapa Dua Island. Yeah, annual report said to me like that information.
Okay, so it said it was because of tourism that they had to go out further.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
If the Anne,
I just have a question that I'd like to follow up briefly. There was towards the end on your findings, no, your discussion slide, you talked about that there's the local communities still gave a positive response to the ecological issues. But then later on the same slide at the bottom, it said, and the community have no high consideration about the environment. I'm still struggling to reconcile those two statements because it sounds to me like they're inconsistent.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, I got the data from questionnaire from the people in Kelapa Dua Island. They said, yeah, they agreed that tourism have a good impact for their environmental. So the questionnaires show a big amount of percent, that there is a good impact of tourism to their environment. But how I can say the local people have no high care to the environment, because yeah, literally the actual condition that occur in Kelapa Dua Island is different with local people said gitu. Local people said that's a good impact to the environmental. But when I walking and circling the people, so many something not relate with the local people said. So yeah, that's
right. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that the local communities were positive about ecological issues, but they didn't show that in their actual day-to-day actions in life. I'm just wondering whether that might be more because they can't rather than because they don't want to.
sorry.
I mean, what I'm suggesting. So what I'm suggesting is that if there is, if it is true that that you found that the local communities are still have a positive response about the positive aspects of the doing something about the ecology. But you're saying that the community doesn't have high consideration because you can't see evidence of it in the way they live. But if that's because they can't, because of poverty, that suggests to me that maybe an education campaign might not be a useful thing to do. May not solve the problem, is what I'm suggesting.
Okay, yes.
Look, no, I think your paper is interesting, and I think you've highlighted some interesting points. But what I'm just drawing to your attention, I think, is that your conclusions afterwards need to take into account all of the available evidence. That's all. That's all. Just think through whether your recommendation there was taking into account all of the needs of the situation. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks,
so
guys. Thank you again, Noor. That brings us to the end of today's session. So I'll extend a thank you once again to our judges, Anne Smith and Sarah Walker. Thanks for coming today. And also massive congratulations to our student presenters for their wonderful presentations today. This recording will be made available online following the conference, and we hope to see you in the other conference sessions later this week. Thanks a lot, guys.